Hello class, and welcome to today's algebra lesson, which is about expressions involving absolute values. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to evaluate the expressions with absolute values. First off, for some vocab, we have absolute value is the distance between a number and 0 on the number line. Absolute values are always positive. It is just asking us how far. The positive and negative tell us what direction. So, for example, -6 and +6 both have an absolute value of 6 because they are 6 spaces away from 0. These bars, which you can type into your computer by holding Shift and then the button between the delete and return to give you that vertical line. So those are called the absolute value bars. That indicates that we want you to be finding how far away from 0 the number is. So we're going to start with some evaluations. We still want to follow PEMDAS. Absolute value falls under the parentheses part. So we want to solve that first. So as I'm plugging in here, I have negative and then absolute value of 5 times a, which is -2, plus 3 times 2 times -2 times -3 minus 1, and then our absolute value bars. So we're going to solve inside first, and we've got this set of parentheses. So I'm going to do 2 times -2 times -3. 2 times -2 is -4, times -3 is +12. So I've got -5 times -2 plus 3 times 12 minus 1. Closing our bars, I need to finish up inside my parentheses with 12 times 1, which is 11. So I've got -5 times -2 plus 3 times 11. Now I have multiplication for both of my next steps. So I'm going to have negative absolute value of -10 plus 33. Finishing inside those absolute value bars, I have negative and then -10 plus 33 is +23. Now I'm going to solve the absolute value part, which is to say how far is 23 from 0. That is 23 spaces away. So I have negative times 23, which gives me my final answer of -23. Go ahead and solve this one on your own. So plugging in our values, 6 for x, -3 for y. We're going to solve, do our subtracting. We have the absolute value of 21, which is 21. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we are dealing with fractions. Since our initial values are given to us as fractions, we want to make sure our final answer, if necessary, is written as a fraction. So, as I plug in for this problem, I'm going to have 23 minus the absolute value of 3 plus 4 times -3/8. Close that absolute value bar. Plus 6 in absolute values times -2/5. So as I go through and simplify, I want to deal with inside my absolute value bars first. So I've got -23 minus 3 doing our multiplication. We have 4 times -3/8. 4 is going to be multiplied by the numerator. Remember, you can treat that as 4 over 1. So I have -12 over 8. -12 over 8 can be reduced by dividing both of those quantities by 4, and that's going to give me -3 over 2, or -1 1/2. Then in my second one, I have 6 times -2/5. You can treat that as 6 over 1. So I've got 6 times -2, which is -12 over 5. That can be simplified to -2 and 2/5. So we've done our multiplication step. Now inside this first absolute value, I still have something further to simplify. So I've got -23 minus 3 minus 1/2 is going to give me 1 1/2. And then plus, we've got nothing further to simplify in the second one, so we've got -2/5. Now, since we've solved everything inside of the absolute value, we want to actually take our absolute value. So I've got 23 minus 1 1/2 is 1 1/2 spaces from 0, so I'm going to leave it as 1 1/2, plus -2 2/5 is 2 2/5 spaces from 0, so I'm going to turn that into +2 2/5. Now I have adding and subtracting to do. Because we have fractions here, you're going to want to get those to a common denominator. So I have 23 minus 1 5/10 plus 2 4/10. Then you could break it down into two separate pieces. First, you can do your whole numbers. 23 minus 1 is 22, plus 2 is 24. Then we've got -5/10 from our first fraction, plus 4/10, which is going to give me -1/10. So 24 minus 1/10 is going to be 23 9/10 for our final answer. Again, because we had fractions to start, we should have fractions as our final answer. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Plugging in your values for A and B, you're going to do your multiplication, simplify inside those absolute value bars, calculate the absolute value. -6 is 6 spaces away from 0. -13 1/4 is 13 1/4 spaces away from 0. Then we do our final step, which is 6 plus 16 is 22. Minus 13 is going to give you 9. But then you have to subtract an extra 4th, which brings you down to 8 3/4. Last example we're going to go through is if we have decimals. If you start with decimals in the problem, your final answer can have decimals in it. So I've got 1.4 minus 2.4 times the absolute value of 5 times -3 plus 0.6. Again, start by solving inside those absolute value bars. So we got 1.2 minus 2.4 times -15 plus 0.6. Continuing inside, we've got -15 plus 0.6, which is going to give me -14.4. Now I'm at the step where the absolute value needs to be solved. So I've got 1.4 minus 2, and then times the absolute value of that is going to be +14.4. It's 14.4 spaces away from 0. Continuing on with PEMDAS, I'm going to do the multiplication next. So I've got 1.4 minus, when I do that multiplication, I get 34.56. And finishing up, 1.4 minus 34.56 is going to give me -33.16. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Plug in your values, solve inside each absolute value bar, take the absolute value, do the multiplication, followed by the subtraction, and you get a final answer of -122.78. If you have questions about this or anything else from the lesson, please feel free to reach out and let me know.